I'm so surprised. We actually have something we really disagree about, and I can't argue with you about it because you're giving up. That's very interesting to me.
Like an idealized.
Pause.
I obviously
This is so bad faith. It is plainly obvious what he's asking. Notice how she starts to dance a lot here because of what he asked. She knew what she'd committed herself to, and it was a bad argument logically, and it was a loser of an argument rhetorically and optically. When I heard this in the video, I think I said at this moment, they are never...
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
So people said you wanted to talk about that Hanz and DemonMama debate?
Oh no, people told me you wanted to talk about it.
Oh, apparently we had very different conclusions. What was your takeaway?
I thought the DemonMama looked really, really, really bad. Hanz was a little loud, but I think that, yeah.
And why do you think DemonMama looked really, really, really bad?
She almost didn't engage on a single point, and I think it became pretty clear that some of her like analogies or stories were like obviously in bad faith. And when she was pushed to like defend an argument, she would immediately pivot and change the topic. And I think that was like pretty readily apparent.
Okay. And you saw that happening more than a couple of times in the conversation?
I mean, it was a short conversation. It was like 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah. So you didn't see it more than a couple of times?
I don't know if I saw anything more than a couple of times. Maybe if I think about it, but there are a couple of things that like stand out to me, but.
And how much of an obligation do you put on Hanz to then refocus that conversation? Because there was one main pivot that I pointed out where he brings up two main points for why he supports the idea of mandates. And then she goes on telling some long story. And then he, instead of refocusing on those 2 points that he made, interrupts her and says that what she's describing is not abolition. And then they go into a whole tangent on that rather than focusing on the 2 points that he gave.
I think he brings the conversation back a couple times well, but then other times he lets her kind of like lead him around like on some dumb points. Yeah.
Okay. And my understanding then is you're putting much more of an onus on DemonMama for dodging on those points from your perspective rather than on Hanz for like choosing not to pursue those points.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to like get people in real time on stuff like that. Hanz could have probably done a better job at refocusing, but I think he refocused pretty well a couple of times given the how like bombastic the conversation was. But I mean, like, you can always do better.
What do you think you refocused onto?
Fuck, I would have to go back and watch my review of it, but like I'm not gonna remember the specific examples. I don't know if somebody in chat can remember, but there were a couple of times where I was watching, it was like, oh, it was good that Hanz brought it back to this question, or that he was able to bring this question back up again.
It's probably how can you make school better than all other options available to parents or students?
Maybe. Oh, and then it was the thing where DemonMama would keep playing this thing where she would say like, oh, like school is really bad, so we shouldn't force people to do it. And Hanz did a good job of like reminding her, well, we said that point didn't matter, so let's move to the next thing. Yeah, that was one part. Yeah, I don't remember anything more specific on that.
Okay, because when we went through the line by line, it did seem like Hanz really failed to ever get this conversation to focus on things. And the one question that he continued to bring up, which was, can we make school better than all other options? I think is a really like hyperbolic question. Like it's like, she's not going to have an answer to this and nobody's going to have an answer to this. And this isn't really tackling the main question that he wanted to focus on, which is around mandates and whether or not we could mandate something. So for
the problem though was that like DemonMama opened this up. She said multiple times. This is a point I think that Booksmarts or that Hanz did a good job at like bringing her back to was what would you do to incentivize school? Because when he first posed that question, DemonMama stalled for time and she said multiple times, "Oh, there's a million things. There's an infinite number of things." And then when she started rattling off stuff, it was like a little bit of nonsense. And then I think she said yummy food, and I think she gives that answer like 2 or 3 times. There's a million ways that we can disincentivize this. But when Hanz pushes her every single time, she never actually gives a single thing. And then I think later on her argument kind of like devolves into, well, children would never choose not to go to school, which is kind of ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, like Hans could have done a better job like doing the conversation. If I was analyzing this, I would be more harsh towards Hans if I was analyzing this as like parent-child or like teacher, special education student or whatever, where like one person is clearly like in control of everything and the other person is just like a screeching banshee. Then it's like, okay, yeah, sure. Like Hans maybe could have done a better job here. You know, maybe he could have put the straitjacket on the person here. Like that would have made more sense. But I'm not going into this conversation like with assuming that Hans has to like be playing both ends like with the ultimate level of maturity. He could have done some things better to pull it back, but I think DemonMama was like clearly acting in bad faith for the majority of this conversation.
Like, okay, so I'm what would you point to as being bad faith? So you can think that her arguments are silly. You could think that she pivoted, but where are you seeing bad faith? I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just
sure.
curious.
There's a few points. So one is when somebody says, so I don't know if you're an essay writer, okay? Anytime somebody puts etc., it means that they're out of things to say, right? So like, for instance, when you're like, oh, well, this is a good idea because of, you know, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. You say et cetera when you're out of things to say. It's not because you have way more things you list off, right? So like, it's kind of like an analogy to that or whatever. Like DemonMama saying in the beginning of that conversation, there's a million ways that we can incentivize going to school. She never gave a single one in that entire conversation, which was kind of like the biggest part of her argument. Well, if you don't want to do mandates, how else can you incentivize it? And DemonMama didn't give a single thing, even though Hans asked multiple times for that.
So you keep repeating she didn't give a single thing, but you noted things that she gave. You may disagree, you may say that they're not like good points. But
she said she gave one thing and she ran away from it instantly because she realized how ridiculous it sounded. She said yummy food.
That's not the only thing. I know. I feel like you're being hyperbolic, but I want to be like really specific because I'm looking at notes.
What other things did she say? I'm curious.
That you can entice students by making the learning experience interesting.
How? That's not an answer to anything.
Oh boy, we're getting into this. So that is an answer though. Like you may not find that to be a good answer, and I would agree. Like it's vague, and I'd say that free lunch is.
It's literally begging the question, right? Like if you could design a curriculum
fair enough,
that's so interesting that kids would naturally be drawn to want to learn it. I mean, then you've solved the question with your own question, right? Like, how do we get kids to go to school? Oh, by making the curriculum so good that kids want to go and learn it. Well, okay, well, wait, how do you do that? Like, that's like, yeah, it's kind of like saying like, how do you act like a good person? Like, oh, we'll just be like incredibly virtuous. Like, yeah, of course. What? Yeah.
Sure. Then why then did he never bounce on that or jump on top of that and say that that's begging the question though?
Because I think he tried to, well, first of all, I think identifying like fallacies in the middle of whatever is cringe. Now, he could have said it in other words, but I think he tried to play off of that. But every time he did, she backed into some really weird. So for instance, I don't remember the specific parts because I didn't write down when I was listening to this, but as they were talking about like the curriculum thing, I'm pretty sure that she started going off on the like, well, me and my siblings, there was never a single day that we didn't want to go to school. We love learning. Me and my siblings love it. I've never heard of a kid not wanting to go to school before, which is unbelievably, like as soon as I would hear that, I would probably start chimping out in the conversation because like this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
You just she said that she doesn't know any kids that didn't want to go to school. Am I hearing you right? Because I don't remember that.
Well, she said there was never a single day where her and her siblings didn't want to go to school and learn.
Right.
I'm almost positive that was like a word for word almost like what she said.
Okay, but not other kids, right? Because I thought I'd heard you say other kids.
Why are we putting so much value
she might not
on
have said
Hans,
other kids, but she might have said other. She might have generalized after that, like kids like to learn. I don't remember 100%.
Would we chastise
I know for a fact she said that her and her siblings,
quickly?
and then she might have generalized after. It's like, oh, kids really like to learn, but that was the implication, right?
That kids trust adults, and that if adults sell it well to them, then kids will be excited to go, and a law may not even be necessary to make them go.
Sure, but
which is very different from what you said.
Okay, sure. Well, let's back up. There was no law in place or whatever when she said her and her siblings never wanted to miss a day of school. This is like another kind of thing that she does. She does this later when Hanz asks her if she would prevent a kid from suiciding or have the state prevent a kid from suiciding. And DemonMama does personally, when she gives that answer, like the implication is that you're either not tackling a question head on or you're trying to do some slight thing. If I say something like, hey, we need to like make school interesting for kids to go to, and you respond with, well, me and my siblings always wanted to go to school. The implication is that like most kids always want to go to school. Even if you don't say it verbally, that's heavily implied, right?
I think that would hurt her. Like, I understand where you're going with this. It's just, it's not what was said in the conversation. And
we're not just going by like the strict, what were the words said? It's like, what are you implying with your... Okay,
right?
but then you're not even listening to the conversation. I don't know. I don't even know what you're listening to then, right?
I'm listening to the words that the people are saying. Like I know we have
that's not the conversation. No, you're parsing code like a computer, right? You're missing half the conversation at that point. If that's like we can't read, like we can't parse language like a computer program, right? Like when somebody sends me to the store to get 12 eggs and a carton of milk, and I go and I get 12 eggs and like 12 cartons of milk, it's like we don't parse language that way. If I were to tell you,
but
like,
she doesn't
hey,
even do what you said. Like I've been holding back on this, but in the same line where she's talking about the law may not even be necessary, kids are excited to go, she also says that for the kids that don't like to go, there's likely an issue, and then she provides solutions to that. So it's like your recollection of this is not matching like the way that the conversation went, even if we have these interpretations. What
were the solutions that she provided?
She said that they could get a tutor for at home. They could enroll them in special education, which I assume that she means homeschooling to some extent.
So get a tutor and enroll them in special ed. These are things that already exist in the current system.
Yeah, for sure.
So these aren't contradictions to anything Hanz is saying.
They're contradictions to what you're saying. Like I'm just pointing out that what you just said is not matching up with the way that the conversation went, and your inferences are like clouding your ability to understand what happened in the conversation.
But you're not. So pulling back, the broad overview is Hanz believes that education should be mandatory.
Yes.
DemonMama is saying that it shouldn't be mandatory. There should be some other way to incentivize this. Right now, you're telling me ideas that DemonMama says that already apply to Hanz's argument. Right now, you can already get a tutor. Right now, you can already be enrolled in special education. None of this has anything to do with whether education should be mandatory or not. In fact, when you say if you can't participate in school, if you say that you can't participate in school well, so you should either get a tutor or enroll in special education, that still sounds like you're implying that there's a mandate to learn. It doesn't
okay. Let's
respond to the argument at all.
Let's take a breather for a second. There's another big problem, another criticism I had with Hanz is he constantly frames everything in terms of making a kid go to school. But as you just said, and as you just changed in your description of this, education is different. And I think that that's what the point of the law is that we want kids to be educated. But that's not a clarification that Hanz makes. Instead, Hanz chooses to focus on making the kids go to school. I agree with you that the law is about...
Again, implication, right? This is like
I'm doing what you want me to do. I'm taking the implication thing.
No. You're reading the actual word. Hanz doesn't care about people going to school. He obviously cares about people getting an education.
But that's not ever what he says. And he focuses on school.
Doesn't he literally say later on that, like, yeah, getting a tutor and all of that is okay? I thought there was a point where he actually said that. You can call it a concession.
Yeah,
but I'm pretty
does.
sure he explicitly. Yeah. So it's not. This is like saying that, like, oh, like I went to bed last night at 10. Well, why did you wake up at 2 p.m.? Oh, I went to bed at 10, but I didn't go to sleep until 2. Like,
and
wait, what?
To be clear, he says that they need therapy.
Sure, but these are all part of like a mandatory education system. Nothing here is breaking the mandatory part.
But hold on, let's be really, really specific, because he says that the therapy would be the required thing, and that's what triggered DemonMama to say, you're saying what I'm saying back to me. He didn't say tutoring or homeschooling. He said the therapy
would be required in order to get back into school.
Yeah, and that's what he says. But that it's school again, Destiny. This is my point. Is like he always couches this in school and not education, which was a failure of his in the debate.
Because school and education are like synonymous in this conversation.
Evidently
more or
not.
Means the same thing. Okay. I would venture a guess that like 98% of people, like school and education in this conversation are like synonymous. Like when you say like, oh, people need to go to school, and then you're like, oh, really? Well, what if I just got private tutors for all of my classes and I go to school? It's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I mean, yeah, but you're like going to school, you're getting an education, right? That's most people would immediately make that concession.
He failed to build a bridge when she immediately after the point is that of therapy is to get them to go to school. She countered with, no, I think that the point of the therapy would for them to be happy and liberated and then to become educated. And he didn't try to build a bridge here, which leads me to believe that his focus was on school. It's not necessarily on the education, because he fails to make that bridge anytime he's given the opportunity, which is why he got so much flack in my review of him.
So stepping back then, I'm just curious, and I'm just on a personal level, you think that Hanz's major focus was that he just wanted children to go to school? Yes. He didn't care about the education? Okay.
I don't know if he didn't care about the education, but he always couches this in school.
Okay.
Do you think I'm crazy for that? He doesn't ever say anything different.
That's one of the most unreal interpretations that I could possibly hear.
How is it unreal?
I don't even know how
it's
to
literally what
he
fucking says, like throughout the whole conversation.
Like, no, I don't even.
Like, if I have to do the line by line, if I have to look at all of their words, he doesn't ever make the bridge anywhere where he can to the education. And if he would have, it would have been a very different conversation, but he doesn't. Now,
No. It would have been a different conversation if DemonMama had anything to actually give in counter to a mandate instead of talking around it and providing like other solutions that just get you to school that could also be mandated.
That educate you.
No. It's not about being. Wait. So do you think that? Hold on. I'm okay. Now I'm fascinated. Do you think that Hanz was arguing in favor of mandating school, but DemonMama was arguing in favor of mandating education?
No, because she's against mandates for this in general.
Okay, but you think DemonMama was? Then what is DemonMama talking about when she says getting a tutor to get educated? And how is that making a concession or building a bridge? How does that connect? Can you connect that for me?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that right after Hanz says that we should get them therapy so that they can go to school, she says, no, I think that the point of the therapy is so that they could be happy, liberated, and then become educated. I'm saying that what Hanz failed to do there, if his focus was on education and not on school, was to build a bridge at education. They're like, oh, okay, so you want them to have therapy to be educated. Well, that's my goal too. Isn't both of our goal at the end to make sure every kid is educated? Then that could have been a very different... Go ahead.
What did he say afterwards?
He said, what if no kid wants to go?
Okay. And what was her follow-up after that?
Then it's a failed system and that you need to start over.
Okay, so how is she providing any solution or anything here? It sounds like she's just saying like if they don't want to go, then the system doesn't work. But she never gave a way to make kids want to go to school or want to get educated.
I totally agree with you on that point. Like that's not my point here. My point here is that if Hanz had meant to talk specifically about education, he had a really good opportunity to build a bridge here when she explicitly stated that. And instead he chose to go to a very hyperbolic question of, well, what if no kid wants to go? And then
because that's the point of the conversation. It's not this whatever weird education school divide you're talking about. The point was, how do you get a kid to go and participate in education, whether that's the tutor we're talking about or whatever, if the kid super doesn't want to?
Yep, that's what Hanz wanted to set out to do, and I don't think he did a very good job of getting answers to that at all.
Well, because I think he asked the right questions, but DemonMama didn't have any answers. Like, how do you have a conversation with someone that says like, oh, well, me and my siblings, every single day, we wanted to go to school. Or when DemonMama is saying, what do you do when a kid breaks out of the car? What are you doing when a kid breaks out of your house? What are you doing when the kid breaks out of the school? Like, how are you supposed to engage with that?
You engage with the solution that he's putting forward, right? Which is that the mandate. Like, okay, well, if the parent can't find a way to get to the kid to school, then they would be in trouble with the law or something.
Yeah, no? And you force them. Yeah, but what was DemonMama's alternative to that? What was her alternative?
She doesn't give one.
Okay, so she fails to do her side of the argument for the entirety of the conversation. It's a 30-minute conversation. She didn't give it.
Okay, let's be super duper clear. I don't agree with DemonMama's position. I don't think she performed well. I just think that when we look at what was the potential of this conversation? What could have been accomplished? What's the kind of conversation that we could have had? The conversation
should have went like this. Hanz should have said, what are things that we could do for an alternative of a mandate for education? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what DemonMama should have said was education shouldn't actually be mandated. She could have said, for instance, there should be alternative paths in society for children to take if they don't want to go to school. Mm-hmm. Or she could have said, we need a radically redesigned system of education where there are different paths that people can take through the education system that doesn't look like traditional school. Or maybe she should have said like homeschooling or something should be like more of an option available, or even the fucking child labor can come back and that should be an alternative to education. Or maybe education can be delayed until you're an adult and there's something. I don't know. These are all, I'm to be clear, I'm not defending any of those arguments. You can argue back and forth with any of them. But any of those things would have been a path towards more conversation. But instead, she vaguely alluded to having millions of ways to do it. But the only thing she ever really said was yummy food. And then she started saying a bunch of irrelevant shit like, oh, well, they could go to therapy first. You're already mandated to go to therapy first. You have problems going to school. Like that's not anything about the mandate, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
So
who do you think? Oh, I'm curious. Who do you think performed better in this conversation?
like it depends on how you're defining performance. So from my perspective, I'm looking at who was less of an obstacle to the conversation moving forward. And I would say that's Hanz, because Hanz had many more options that he could have used to get this conversation on track and refused to do that at many points. Her defending her argument, if she chooses to be slimy and whatever, which she definitely was, I just don't think that outweighs all of the failures on Hans's part to get this point across. Like even the question that he continued to reiterate, how can we make school better than all other options, is hyperbolic and not what you asked just now, which could have been way better.
I shouldn't have to. What I did right there is I'm treating the opponent like a dumb fuck. What I just did, I'll do what I just did as a mode of condescension. When I get to the end of an argument and I realize the other person is clueless, I might say, you could argue this way, or you could, I've done this to a lot of socialists. You could say that a co-op could work like this. You could do this, you could do that. I would never expect myself or anybody else to actually walk my adversary through the entire like conversation though. That's insane to me. Like, do you acknowledge that you're like putting way more onus on Hanz in this conversation to like conduct it in a reasonable way than you are on DemonMama?
Sure. I think if that's like a criticism that you want to make, that's fine.
But why should Hanz be the one that has to act like the adult and DemonMama can act like a child, and the expectations for her are so much lower?
Because I feel like she's doing like much better with her position. Like if she chooses to oh man, this is so difficult to explain.
Well, it's difficult. She doesn't defend her position ever a single time. How is she doing much better?
But she does, because she says that you could be doing other things other than school. The problem is that he's like focusing on school. Like, I already told you, Destiny. Special education, tutoring, homeschooling. Don't tell me. Don't.
That's school.
It's not fucking school, dude. These are different fucking things. Like, are you for real? I thought you're fucking memeing on me.
No, wait, I can't tell if you're for real right now. I feel like I'm getting brain blasted. Having to go to tutoring, forced to be enrolled in tutoring because you can't go to school so that you can go to school. It's like school.
Because you can't go to school. You said it in your own statement. That's its own thing. Tutoring is different than school.
But the implication is there is a mandate to get tutored so that you can go to school.
To get educated. To get educated is the point. There is a big difference between these two things. And part of the reason that this conversation didn't go well is because Hanz didn't make this distinction. If he did, they could have agreed much sooner.
I disagree. They wouldn't have agreed because DemonMama would have continued to dance around it because she didn't defend a single one of her points in this conversation.
You said she doesn't defend a single one of her points, but she does, and I walked you through that. Don't be hyperbolic, because I cannot accept it when you're hyperbolic.
What does she defend? Wait, I'm sorry. Walk me through it again, because I lost the plot. What point did she defend?
The solutions part that you said she had no solutions for, she gave you two of them. You may not think that one of them was good or both of them were good, but you have to acknowledge that she gave those. Like you're putting me in a position where I have to keep repeating. Like she gave. Sure. Stuff.
Let me rephrase. Okay, let me rephrase then what you're saying, so I can make sure I understand. So the argument is whether or not we should mandate school, very specific, the building. And you're telling me, well, she's defending mandating, or she's defending getting kids to become educated because she's in favor of them being forced to have tutors if they can't get educated.
She's not in favor of forcing anybody to do anything, but she is in favor of getting kids educated, and she thinks all the kids should be educated. Like,
okay, and you think Hanz was not arguing in favor of education. He just wanted kids to go to the building.
He doesn't say the building, but he says go to school. Yes.
What do you think most people mean when they say go to school? I'm just curious.
I love your focus on this. I love it.
Because it is. I mean, you can pull all the chats, because I might actually be just lost from this conversation. This is like unreal to me. I don't actually know. I almost feel like I'm being trolled. Like, I don't like when somebody's arguing if we should mandate going to school. They're talking about mandating education, right? Like, I'm pretty sure. Well, maybe personal biases aside, like if you say like we should mandate school, some people would be okay with like homeschooling. Like I'm okay with homeschooling as long as you pass the curriculum. Does that count as going to school if you're homeschooled because your home becomes a school, or is that just getting an education?
Somebody that's homeschooled wouldn't say that they went to school, would they? They would say they were homeschooled.
But that's a type of schooling. That's a school, right?
It is a type of schooling, sure. But you're not going to fucking school. Like that's why she gets to say the shit that she's saying throughout so much of this conversation. That's why it would have been important to make that distinction. Like You had to remember that my goal when I'm watching this is different than your goal when you're watching this. I'm looking for a way that these two people could have easily connected. And by redefining this as education and not going to school, which she constantly focuses on, they could have probably moved forward because she offers alternatives. And if he could have said, oh yeah, I'm cool with these alternatives and I'm just in it to get kids educated, then they could have agreed because she said as much in the middle of the conversation. But every opportunity that he has to build that bridge with her, he fails to, or he chooses to say something that's silly. Like, what if no kid ever wants to go to school, right? Like,
that's not a silly thing. He's trying to get to the meat of the matter. What do you do if a child doesn't want to go to school? But you're saying he means going to the building and not get educated.
Yes, because that's not what he says.
Okay.
Like, I have to stick to like what he says in the conversation. Like, I know that the inference thing is an easy leap to make for you. I can't make that when I'm doing the review or when I'm doing the analysis of it, because that leap not being made is part of why this conversation is not going well, why these people are not connecting.
No,
and I have to point that out.
Disagree. That is such a wrong. The problem is your analysis is like corrupted by the inability to parse the inference, right? The reason why this conversation didn't connect isn't because Hanz assumed that school and education were the same thing. It's because DemonMama couldn't defend any of the arguments related to like what do we do as opposed to mandating it by law.
So you don't think that's any part of the disconnect is coming from her inability to parse that same inference that you're expecting me and her both to make? You don't think
absolutely
that any part
not.
of it is
a single part?
that?
Absolutely not. No
Really?
way. Because why would she say that like one of the alternatives then is yummy lunches? Doesn't that imply going to a school building to incentivize it rather
because
than education?
He asked about school. Yeah, if you want a kid to go out of the house and go to school, that's definitely one of the things for school, right? Like,
but why would she talk about incentivizing going to school instead of just incentivizing getting an education?
Because he's talking about school. That's my point. Like, I don't want you to think like I want you to at least see where I'm coming from on this. Like, do you see how when she's talking about the free lunches thing, this is coming from the focus on school and not on the focus on education, right? Like it's couched into exactly what you just asked me about. Why would she say free lunch? Because we're talking about school.
No. If she doesn't believe that students should be going to school, then why is it that when he asks her for examples of how you can incentivize kids to go to school, why would she start answering that? Why would she just say, hold on, I don't want to talk about kids going to school. I just want to talk about kids getting educated. Why would she jump in and entertain that idea then? Unless they both had an understanding that education and school were synonymous in this conversation.
Because he's talking about mandating kids to go to school and she's staying within that. Like, I don't understand.
But that's not an argument. Why? But that's not her argument.
Her argument is you shouldn't mandate kids to go to school. That was what was laid out in the very beginning.
Wait, no. You said that her argument was that you shouldn't be able to mandate. She doesn't believe you should mandate education or school.
Let me see. Yeah, I do have education written. My bad. Okay, so not education.
Okay.
Or
so if somebody were to ask me, let's say somebody were to have a debate on me on how we can improve dating. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about how we can improve dating. And they say, okay, so what do you think is the best way to get all black people off of Tinder? Do you think I would engage with that argument? I would say, wait, that's not what I'm here to talk about. What the fuck? So if she believed that she was having a conversation about mandating education, and then Hanz said, okay, well, what's the best way we can like incentivize kids to go to school without a mandate? Why would she go down that conversation path of talking about how to get kids to go to school if what she's really there is to talk about like education? That doesn't make any sense.
Because I really don't think that her focus is on education so much as the mandates themselves. Like, if I'm being honest, like if I were to give you an answer, it would be because her focus is on the mandates more so than it is on the education. And when he asks about school and the mandating for school, she's going to focus on school. Like, does that make sense?
Then why didn't she? Okay. My mind is blasted. Is there any other part of the conversation you want to talk about?
I feel like I really want to argue with you about this because I feel like you're not understanding that there's a significant difference between these two things. Like,
there's not. I absolutely reject that. I just wholesale.
You really don't think if he would have said education throughout this entire conversation and focused on education more broadly in the spirit of the law being about education, that this wouldn't have gone differently?
Not even close. Of course not.
Really?
I don't think it would have changed a single thing in this. No, it would have been one sentence at the beginning, uttered and forgotten immediately. Yeah. I actually can't believe that you think that like DemonMama. Not well. I mean, like, unless you're assuming that DemonMama is like 45 IQ, and that like she's getting stuck and she can't realize the difference between school and education either in the conversation. Like, why wouldn't she just say, "Oh, hold on, let's clarify. We're talking about sending a kid to school or getting a kid educated." Why would she start immediately talking about ways to incentivize kids to go to the building instead of being educated? Like, it absolutely doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
So she's on the defense about mandates in particular, and mandates about going to school. That's why. So from her perspective, she's on the defense.
No, school and education, you said, not just school. She doesn't want mandates for school or education.
That was a concession that she gave at the very beginning, or a reframing that she gave at the very beginning, but we never ever build off of that. Instead, we continue to focus on school, which is why I'm saying the education thing is always there, and we could talk about it in terms of education, but the talking about it on school is making our job harder than it even needs to be.
Okay. I don't know where we go from here. I don't think I'm ever going to I don't think I'm ever going to agree with this.
Right, because you think that if we didn't change the terminology from school to education, or if Hanz didn't focus on like that we should get kids educated, that they wouldn't have been able to agree, or at least to come to some kind of compromise. Like, I would agree to give you like some, I don't know, like an olive branch. I don't think that he would have flipped her opinion necessarily on mandates, but I think he could establish with her and make it clear how much they both want to like improve education and improve maybe access to education.
This conversation wasn't about improving education or improving access to education. That had nothing to do with this conversation.
But that gets closer to the topic of mandates at least.
Nope. Not only is it irrelevant, they specifically address this because Hanz specifically asks DemonMama if they got rid of, if school was perfect, would you still be okay with a mandate? And she still said no. So that's total. All of what you just said was totally relevant.
But he doesn't say if you had a perfect education system. Like this may be super semantic. But this,
I can't. All right, listen. I hope you're having fun memeing. Okay, good luck. Is there any other parts of this conversation you want to go over? Or are we good?
I'm so surprised. We actually have something we really disagree about, and I can't argue with you about it because you're giving up. That's very interesting to me. I guess it's frustrating, but this is like a big difference. We can't. But we're at an impasse. Like, if somebody comes in to argue over like should school be mandatory, like the assumption is of course thinking about school/education, right? Like that's a given. Like I wouldn't even think twice about that. I can't even imagine that somebody would try to like argue against that. So. But we can't. But if we don't get past this point, obviously, none of the rest of the conversation matters. So I don't know what else we can talk about. Okay. Did you have any other opinions in this conversation? I'm just still blown away that you don't think it would have made a difference if we would have talked about education. Like, no, I think that DemonMama like pivoting to giving silly answers, like doing the me personally thing, I think is a show of bad faith. Why is it bad faith to talk about her personal experience? When we're having a conversation about whether the state should or shouldn't do something, and you're like committing yourself down a bad path, and then I ask you a question about it, and you start giving, me personally, then you have stopped engaging with a hypothetical because you realize you've committed yourself to bad answers. For another good example of this. That wasn't in response to him asking a question, though. It absolutely was. In response to him asking if your kid was like suicidal, like, do you think that somebody should do something to stop that or whatever? She was like, me personally, I would do something to stop that. And then as soon as he tried to reframe it back to what the obvious question was, is should the state be involved? And then she said no. And then I think he reframed it again. He's like, okay, so if there's a suicidal kid being neglected by their parents, should the state be involved in this? She shut down the convo because she couldn't take the logical bite or the rhetorical or optical bite of owning that hypothetical because it sounds fucking horrible, because it is pretty horrible. So, and that's when the whole conversation shut down. That's exactly what happened. Okay. Can we walk through that part just real quick? That last part, because I thought you were talking about the previous thing. Oh, sure. Okay. So they established that if something like a cancer needed to be removed from a kid, it's okay to force them to remove the cancer, right? And then they move on to, they say, I would like to build the system without force, except as a last resort, right? And then he asks, what if your kid wanted to Roblox themselves? What if they wanted to commit suicide? Would you stop your kid from committing suicide? And she said, yes, but not other kids. So when she's responding here, and I'm going to be good faith because I hold myself to be good faith because I especially don't like this person, and I really just want to go out of my way to be good faith with her. I think that she's meaning, would you personally involve yourself with some other kid's suicide? And she said that she wouldn't if it's somebody else's kid, but she would personally if it were her kid. But this is different from the state or there being some use of force by the state as a last resort, right? Because then when they get into a screaming match after this, I think she says that you pulled a switcheroo on me because we're talking about me personally and my actions when before we were talking about the state and whether the state would use
because
force.
it's not a switcheroo. He's obviously like doing a line of questioning to figure out like where the thing would stop, right? Like, let's say for instance, like your kid won't eat because he's a picky eater. Well, would you force your kid to eat lunch if he wasn't? It's like, well, yeah, of course I would. Would the school force the kid to eat lunch? No, that's totally different. Why are you pulling the switcheroo? It's not a switcheroo. You're just trying to figure out like where the line is. But as soon as she realized what she'd committed herself to with her previous answers, and I even said this when I listened to it, I said as soon as that came up, I said, I bet the conversation is going to stop here and they're never going to revisit it. And they didn't. Because every time he tried to bounce back to that point, she started screaming, shut the conversation down, and said she was done talking about it. It was absolutely impossible to move at that point because she realized she'd committed herself to something that just sounded really bad.
I think that she committed herself at the point where she said she's okay with building a system without force, except as a last resort. I think that's the point where...
No, hold on. No. But force as a last resort is still enforced by force. That's still by force. That doesn't mean anything.
That's what I'm saying. I think that was the point where she doomed herself. It wasn't on this answer about suicide with kids.
No,
it was...
but she was saying that she would never want the state to intervene if the kid was suicidal and neglected. That's what she had committed herself to, and that's what she didn't want to follow to the end of that conversation.
No, because the question was about her personally and if she would get involved, unless I'm remembering this incorrectly.
But the next question was going to be, what if another kid was like being neglected? Right. Should the state intervene? That was the next question.
I don't.
But she saw that coming and didn't want to go forward with it.
I don't think you're seeing where I'm saying that there's a difference here. So
I know there's a difference, but I'm just telling you it's going to go from one to the other.
Well, hold on.
Of course, it's obvious.
I don't think that you do. That's why I'm saying this. And you know I'm good faith. I try to be good faith with you, dude. So the first question was about a system with force by the government, right? The second question is about if you personally would get involved. I think that is the disconnect here. Unless I'm remembering this wrong, one was about her personally as her own personal being, if she would get involved. And then the first question was about a system, and a system where I hope we could both make the inference here that we're talking about like the legal system where force is used as a last resort, right? Like these two things are different. If you personally would get involved is different from like, should the state require force as a last resort to get involved, right?
Sure. But I'm just saying that like the one is going to lead to the next, right?
What do you mean by that?
You asked let's say you asked the first one, it's like, would you get involved if your kid was suicidal or whatever? And she's like, no, I wouldn't do anything to change that. And I was like, oh, well then you're done with the conversation. But if you would personally do something to intercede on behalf of your kid being so, okay, well, do you think that the state should, if there's not another parent willing to do so for another child that's being neglected? That was the obvious next question. No,
okay.
That's where, no. That's where Hanz went. It's not where I'm going. That was his next question.
Did he ask that? Did he get to ask that? Because I have written down that
barely starting to. Well, we can go back and listen to that if you want. But he was barely starting. But DemonMama saw where that was going, and then the conversation shuts down.
It's not necessarily that, because I have written down that his next question was, "Are you sure?" So I don't.
Do you want to listen? Do you want to start? Do you want to start the conversation at that timestamp, and we can listen and see if we can both figure out what we think is going on?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay, can you link me the VOD with that timestamp or the YouTube video with that timestamp?
Can you ask your thousands of chatters?
Chatters, let's go.
And like, while they're doing that, and because I feel like I'm always in this crazy fuck position, because what I want to do on the platform is like to look at word by word, what are people saying, try to control for biases. Like, I don't believe in her stupid fucking position. I think that she's a bad interlocutor. I think that she's bad faith. And I'm always trying to fucking correct for this by being super technical and like super to the point with her, with Bob Seven, with these other people. And I feel like it's easy for you to just make it seem like I'm crazy for doing this, but I feel like it's like what I have to do. I have to go off of like the nuts and bolts of what happened. And
yeah, because like part of human speech is like looking into inferences and stuff like that. Like 99% of what we say is unsaid. There's like a theory of language that has to do with this, but like very, very few sentences that we say actually make much sense. Like, for instance, if I ask you, like, are you hungry? Like, if you just look at me and say like, yeah, and then I walk away, you're going to think I'm a fucking moron, right? Hello?
Why?
Wait, if I walk into, let's say I'm your dad okay, and you're on your computer,
I'm
and
sorry,
I walk into your room.
I shouldn't meme. This is not the time to meme. I understand.
Yeah, okay. The vast majority, or I could even ask more specific, like, hey, do you want to go get something to eat with me? And you say, yeah. Or I'm like, hey, do you want to get ready so you can go get something to eat with me? You're like, yeah. And I don't actually take it. I was like, oh, I was just asking, right? I didn't actually, right? There's like half of, not even half, like there's this huge iceberg underneath the water of shit that's implied when we speak that we don't actually say like 100%. So it's just weird to just try to like look at like the actual verbal thing and not like, well, what is actually being said or argued or debated in this conversation? Did anybody have a link? Hold on.
Should be sometime shortly after 23 minutes.
Sure. And then just real quick. So when Hanz is saying like education system here, is it not on DemonMama do you have this written down at all that he's literally saying like education system?
Whereabouts?
I linked you in Discord. I linked you in Discord.
Let's see here.
Education system of the new one, like the good one that we made, over literally anything and everything else they can do.
Yeah, I mean, there's
that like 5.5 minutes in the conversation.
So what I'm asking is, how do we ensure that we get enough of society? Because you agree that's a terrible thing. It's like if we have like a portion of society that can't read or write, how do we get them to voluntarily choose this like education system of the new one, like the good one that we made?
Fair enough. Yeah, I did not get this. That's my bad.
Okay, so that didn't change how any of this conversation went. But regardless, okay, here's the next thing.
He continues to focus on school, to be fair, but yes. I
still think it's pretty obvious what is being said. But okay, I'm going to start this at normal speed, and I'm going to listen. Okay, let me know when you're ready. Okay.
Yep. Ready.
3, 2, 1, go.
What if they're gonna what if they're gonna Roblox themselves? Like, would you be okay with force then?
I mean, me personally, I would.
Okay, hold on. Actually, excuse me. Hold on a second. Wait. We're going to go back to 26 minutes. Okay. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, back to 26. You said.
3. Sorry. Let me know. Yeah.
I'm slow. Okay, I'm ready.
3, 2, 1, go.
You seem to take a lot of issue when I said use force as a last effort with the superchild, who like cannot function in society. They're willingly making choices.
Yeah, because you said that they should be institutionalized.
To get the help they need, absolutely. If they're a danger to themselves, they're a danger to everybody else.
Well, then I guess you and I just have different positions on.
No, but this is the last use of force.
What institutions.
What if they're gonna? What if they're gonna Roblox themselves? Like, would you be okay with force then?
I mean, me personally, I would take. Excuse me, hold on a second. Wait.
Okay. Fuck! I'm letting you gaslight me in this conversation. I should be listening through all of this as we're talking about it. He did not ask her if she personally would be okay. It is obvious in the context that he is talking about using the force of the state to intervene, not if she would personally do it for her child.
I would take.
Do you acknowledge that is not what he asked? It wasn't, would you personally do this with your personal child? They were still having a conversation about public policy and what the government should do, right?
In context, yes.
Okay, I'm at 23 or 26:30. Okay, and then I'm gonna start it again. Okay.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go.
Me personally, I would take. Excuse me, hold on a second. Wait.
What's the prescription?
Whoa! Don't. Oh, wow! We're gonna do the performative thing. Let's do it. All right. Listen, you want to hear? Me personally, if my child was going to like kill themselves or was eminently in physical danger, then yes, I would tackle them. I would be like, look, let's get you out of the danger. I know you'll see through this on the other side.
What about other people's kids? Would you force them? Would you? You wouldn't let the state take children from parents when the kid says they're going to kill themselves and the parents aren't doing anything. You're really going to let that happen? Really? Wait, that's what you're dying on right now?
Hold on a second. You're saying that are we talking about like an idealized?
Pause. This is so bad faith. It is plainly obvious what he's asking. Notice how she starts to dance a lot here because of what he asked. She knew what she'd committed herself to, and it was a bad argument logically, and it was a loser of an argument rhetorically and optically. When I heard this in the video, I think I said at this moment, they are never going to actually address this question, and DemonMama is going to rage quit, and that is exactly what happened. I didn't pre-watch, but it's obvious with the way that she's dancing it that she doesn't want to answer it. How can you read this any other way?
Fair enough. My apologies. I concede on this one for sure. He was very, very specific here, and she was clearly going to weasel out of it, and she's forcing it to be about her personally.
prior to this, when he brought up like the force as a last resort thing, notice how her position is changing as well. When earlier he said we should use force as a last resort, and she was like, oh, so you would institutionalize kids that are a danger to themselves? That's what they were talking about. And he said, yeah, of course. But now all of a sudden she doesn't want to use force there. So what the fuck is her position actually? If you can't institutionalize somebody, then you have no force. What is your force? Sending them like a meanly worded letter? Giving them a phone call? Like, where is your force at?
Okay. Yeah, I would agree on this last part for sure.
Okay, and then also he did say education system earlier, and it made zero difference in this conversation. Okay.
Well, I will admit that he did say the education system in the very beginning. This may seem pedantic, but then we continue to do school throughout, right? So I think this is.
But DemonMama never like clarifies between the two, so I think it's safe to assume that she's assuming both are synonymous with one another, as 99% of people would if you were talking about school versus education system. Nobody's talking about the building.
You know what, Destiny? I don't like this lady, and I think I'm done defending her. Okay. If we want to make the inference jump that that these two things are the same thing, school and education are the same thing, then I retract. I admit that I'm wrong. I admit that it may not have made a difference. This person doesn't seem to necessarily care. Fair enough.
Wow. Okay. Well,
you've done it. You've convinced me, and you've made me tired.
What else do you wanna scream about? Have you played any 4X games?
No, what's that?
Oh, I honest to God, I couldn't even explain it to you even if I wanted to. It's just games with lots and lots of menus, like Civilization or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Then you have. I'm trying to learn how to play Stellaris, and I just am lost. But
you earned it, buddy.
Okay. Well, Hanz probably wants to shout at you, so you can go argue with him too if you want next.
Oh God, that's not going to be fun. I need your advice.
What's up, buddy?
Advice. No, never mind. I'm not going to ask you this.
Well, now you kind of have to. Now you have to. What do you mean?
I'm getting sick of having a fucking... So, okay, I have a problem, all right? And it's that I'm biased, okay? When I start a conversation like this, I really, really, really dislike DemonMama, and I really, really, really dislike her stupid fucking argument. And so I twist and contort my brain in any way that I could possibly see that she's getting confused, or she doesn't understand, or how the other person could help her. And I'm clearly overcorrecting, and this is a good example of that. But I don't know what to do about this. I don't know how to walk this line, or to be not biased or be charitable to the one side without necessarily overcorrecting in this way. I agree that there was...
I don't know. I try to follow as many inferences as I can in the ways that make sense to me. But I mean, there are times when I miss them. I mean, there are probably times when you miss them. I mean, that's a really, really complicated nuance. How do you listen to an argument and figure out what both sides are trying to say, and then figure out who's doing a better or worse job? That's a really complicated thing, right? We all kind of do that on the fly in real time, and it's different for every situation.
A disappointing answer.
Well, I mean, you're asking me for the key question of all debates. How do you remove your bias when interpreting a situation? If I had the answer to that, I would be the best Supreme Court justice. I would be the best legislator, the best judge, the best jury in the world, right? That's a really hard thing to do, right?
She's so slimy and dishonest, you effed yourself trying to be charitable toward her.
Okay. Because I feel I do this for other people like Vosh and stuff too, and their communities still think I'm super fucking mean to them and unreasonable against them. And it's I don't know. It feels like a fucking uphill battle I'm getting sick of.
Everybody, here's the way that I learned it, okay? If you go into a community and everybody's making personal insults at you, they're calling you short, fat, gnome, dumb fuck, whatever shit, you're probably pretty correct in what you're saying. If people are tearing you apart on some factual basis, or actually attacking and critiquing arguments that are founded in reality, then you probably made a bad argument or fucked up or something. That's how I figure it. So when I go through and I read feedback at the end of the day and everybody is calling me a cuck, virgin, whatever crazy random shit people say about me, then I probably said something that's pretty correct. And that's why they are lashing out and they're upset and they don't have anything else to say. But if I say something that's oh, Destiny didn't know about this or that, or he didn't even know this thing, and it's oh shit, well maybe I missed some factual stuff. All criticism comes from a place that makes sense. It might just not be immediately sensible, right? Like I don't want to say Republican, a guy that is constantly homophobic throughout his entire life, who's secretly gay, like his homophobia can make sense and that we can understand where it's coming from, but it might not seem like a super logical thing, but like that doesn't mean it's like beyond the pale of comprehension. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To be fair, your community sometimes gives arguments and they're just really dumb, or they hyper focus on one specific thing to the detriment of the whole thing. So I don't know if that.
Sure, I agree. Like, does it matter if you have one styrofoam cup or 1,000? It's not much of a difference, right? If anything, buying 1,000 at once is probably better because you're not going to the store every time and getting them in different 20 styrofoam cup packs. I agree. Even my community makes a lot of dumb fuck arguments. 100% it happens, you know? A lot of my community here are still eating out of sugar cones instead of eating or waffle cones instead of the superior sugar cones. You know, no community is perfect. Yeah, it's impossible. It's really, really, really hard because you either have communities that will circle jerk the fuck out of you, which mine does to me sometimes, or you have communities that will like relentlessly attack you in every single thing, which mine does sometimes, or other people will do all the time. So it's an impossible terrain to navigate or landscape to navigate. Like a lot of larger content creators don't engage with public feedback at all because it's so difficult to do it. That's probably the norm when you're a larger content creator. You just don't engage with any of it. You don't read any of it. You've got a person that manages it. You tweet and then you turn your phone off. You never look back.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Fuck. Well, I'm happy we had this conversation. I'm happy we got feisty, and then I conceded so you would be quiet, and now
Sure. Well, I don't care. I don't care if you consider it. That's never the care. If you want to see me going through the same thing, because I've had to think a lot about this, my analysis of things that Lauren Southern says has been super tested. Because for that whole like 2-month period before we'd actually had like any formal debates, my whole community was like, "Oh, this is obviously white nationalist dog whistle. She went through the left eye. Hitler was known for doing that. Oh my God, she's secretly blah 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 blah." Like every fucking day, anytime I would say anything, like, "Oh my God, League of Legends, didn't you hear when she was hooking with Thresh? She was saying this is just like one of my ancestors owned a slave." Like blah blah. Like every fucking post, there were like 20 of them, and I had to think for a long time. I was like, okay, fuck, am I being overly charitable to Lauren Southern? Am I actually like missing like a ton of shit, or like are people just really fucking mad? Like it is an inhumane task to try to sort through that type of public feedback and try to like discern like, okay, well, what criticisms here are founded in reality that demand my attention, and what criticisms are just people being mad, and then can I do something to alleviate that, or should I just ignore it? It's really, really, really difficult to do.
Okay.
Where are you at now? Where do you live now?
I'm in such a shitty fucking place, dude. Romania is so gross.
Romania? Holy shit. What do you... Damn. You have fiber internet at least, right?
I guess.
No?
I think I do.
Yeah.
Your fucking subreddit thinks that we hate each other or something like that. Can you like alleviate their concerns?
The thing is that like anytime anybody makes a mean comment about anybody, they think that because your clip was like, oh, Destiny's opinions are fucking stupid sometimes. Generally, when I see stuff like that, I just assume people are talking shit. I don't really care that much. And I think somebody even asked me, he's like, oh, I'm assuming he's just like fucking around or whatever. But like people will see that sometimes they're like, oh my God, he thinks that every single opinion is really fucking bad. Dan was right. Burn the bridge. Like people will go like crazy, like hardcore. I don't know. Just people do what they do. That's always going to be like a thing. Yeah, of course. I read all my subreddit, of course. What do you mean?
Okay. I know. Yeah. Huh. Okay. Just wanted to confirm that because people get crazy. It's good to know that you know.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah, people do it. The only thing that bothers me, and you've never done this before, but the only thing that bothers me is when somebody takes a lot of shots publicly, but then they get mad when you shoot back. That was one of the big issues I've had with other, not political people, but other large content creators on Twitch will like constantly make jokes about me, or they used to. Like, oh, Destiny show up. I was like, okay, well, this guy does this thing. But then whenever I would like fire back, they'd be like, what the fuck, dude? That's so mean. Why would you do that? And they like get really like ass mad about it and DM me and shit. I was like, okay, fuck you. But yeah, I mean, as long as but we don't do that, so it's all good. It is what it is.
So the next time I hear you say something mean about me, I have to be like, well, we did say some shit about Destiny, so we got to let it go.
Sure. I don't think I say mean things about you that often, do I?
I don't think you do really at all.
Yeah, okay. Especially because like if there's like a jerk wave where my sub is like being hating towards you because you're giving a take that you don't like, if I were to say something like, oh yeah, Booksmarts is just really dumb here or whatever, then I would like dramatically empower every negative commenter in that thread, and they would be like fucking super energized, and they'd be like, holy fuck, Destiny agreed with us, Booksmarts is the fucking demon hellspawn, like, oh, and then it's going to be like a million times worse. So I try not to like piggyback onto like feedback like that. That would be like really fucked up, I think.
Damn. Well, thanks. Good to know you don't
no
do it
problem,
for me.
buddy. Love you, buddy.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Stay safe. Okay.
I will. I'll try not to be a
Bye.
dumb fuck. Bye.